So with no further ado, Lindsay, welcome.
Thank you so much. Very kind words from you, and hope that I can live up to them. It was a pleasure meeting you all, and really appreciate you guys sort of tuning into Fort Health, which is what we're trying to build as an affordable, accessible way to access child and adolescent mental health care using telehealth. As Ellen said, I'm on the founding team as the clinical director. I am a psychologist with a background in both child and adolescent psychology in the Harvard system up in the Boston area, but also a psychologist with an expertise in leading large telehealth practices and groups. So I've been practicing in telehealth since prior to the pandemic, when telehealth was still, new, for one of the first sort of large companies that was figuring out how to deliver care using technology. So as we talk about screen time, I really want to really emphasize that, like, I am a walking, talking example of how screens and the internet and social media, which I think are all kind of used interchangeably for better or worse in many of these discussions, are integral to our world right now. That I have quite literally built a career off of the connection and the connection that technology and screens can foster, and the boundaries and the barriers that it can break down. So let's see if I can share my screen here. So when we talk about like navigating this digital landscape, I think one of the and I have my logo here up here. Sorry guys, but the Fort logo up here. One of the things I really want to start out by saying is it's not all good and it's not all bad. In the context of folks who either love or take care of or teach or parents or live with someone with ADHD or have it themselves, and the rest of us, right? There are a lot of nuances that we take a lot of risk with when we try and do an all or nothing approach to the evils of technology, screen time, social media, because there are, frankly, I mean, look at us, we're all talking and learning together using a screen, right? I work from home using a screen. I've been able to parent differently because I've worked from home for all my babies' little lives. They're only 6 and 8 now. I've been more present and home as a parent because of screens. So it's kind of my message here to start out with is this is not all good or all bad. And I think I'm not going to be another person who kind of comes in with stats that are scary or frightening or kind of fear-mongering, because I feel like we've all seen a lot of those, that we know that social media can have a really negative effect on certain kids, certain adolescent ages, and people of all ages, right? It can be associated with things like depression or anxiety or negative body image. That technology can take us away from things that bring joy and health and wellness to our lives. And really importantly, that the technology, the ever-present, the ever-presence of technology as someone in the room is eroding, I think, attention and executive functioning, even for folks who may have never had that particular area of weakness, without that certain stimuli of screens and of technology. So I do also want to start out by saying, like, I'm not an ADHD expert. I'm a psychologist. I'm a wellness sort of all-around child and adolescent expert. I am a parent myself. And as I was sort of gearing up for this, I was noticing how vulnerable I am to the very things that I was writing about. So I don't feel particularly proud of these slides because I myself was going down these sort of technology rabbit holes, like, oh my God, look at this article on ADHD and executive functioning and screen time. And oh my gosh, this is such a great resource. How can I put this into all the slides as well? So even I'm a busy person, like all of us on this call. I couldn't sort of regulate and time manage my own sort of planning for this presentation because of all the wealth that the internet and that screens and technology opens up to me. And I thought like I would just put that out there and own that, because I think it's a really like kind of saying, it's telling, right, that we're all vulnerable to what makes regulating screen use so difficult for all of us, and particularly those with ADHD. So it's a little bit about me. Along with like saying it's not all or good bad, it's not all good or all bad, we have to, I use the word parents and caretakers a lot here, and forgive me, it doesn't have to apply to parent children. That's sort of my lens, my kind of like my automatic baseline here. But miss something if we are seeing it as all good or all bad. We're going to miss a chance to connect and have conversations with whoever the important people in our lives are. An all or nothing approach shuts down conversations. It alienates people who have a different thought or opinion or stance. And let's all just, I really encourage us all to be curious and understanding and accepting of the good, excuse me, even if that's not something that you have experienced. Sorry. So for vulnerable populations, for people who are like geographically isolated, who live in places where they're surrounded by people who don't look like them or identify like them or think like them, social media and the internet can be a connector, and it can be a place of health. It can be a place of social activity, feeling like you're not alone, finding your people, your voice, and really self-empowerment. And I also really want to give credit to the younger generations of today, because I really see a lot of self-love, of acceptance, of like a stance against bullying or putting others down, or there's just they're doing a lot of really good stuff out there. They're more tolerant of others. They stand up for one another, and there will always be bullying. But I tell you, when I go online myself and I go on to like the neighborhood next door app or the neighborhood Facebook page, which I try not to because it depresses me, but I see the older generations, myself and above, they're the nasty ones. They're the ones who are really kind of using the platforms to be not particularly nice to others. And so just want to call out, give people credit where credit's due. And open up our eyes to have a well-rounded conversation, because the other thing is that social media and screen and technology use is not going anywhere. We can't sort of wish and pray and hope that like the pendulum will swing the other way and my second grader will not be on a tablet in public school for some learning activities, or social media will no longer exist. It's not going anywhere. It also is something, like I said, that is literally designed, like technology and the products and the apps are literally designed to pull us in and to cause that urge to go back repeatedly, that like sort of addictive or compulsive or repetitive behavior. For anyone, for adults, for kids, for all neuro sort of divergent or not states, like everybody is vulnerable to, they do their jobs really well, right? And it's actually fascinating to learn about the techniques and the design and the behavioral design and the technology design that elicits certain human behavior, but it's all designed to pull us in. We're all vulnerable, and this is a systemic state, and sort of acknowledging that and talking about that in an age-appropriate way with kids or teens or adults is an important part of this conversation, because to pretend that doesn't exist is not helpful either. I also think like it's fair to say that limiting, well, not limiting necessarily, but totally restricting a child's social media or technology use, actually, it can actually be harmful. That this is a way for folks to connect with their peers, and peers and friends are so important to children, to teens, to all of us, right? So like to have a hard and fast stance on all or nothing is just actually could be harmful to a child, to a teen, to a young adult. So I don't want to like try and be an expert here on ADHD. I've already told you guys are the experts here, and I am going to talk to you. I'm going to really try to make this about practical, hands-on tips and suggestions to think about, to implement in your real lives. But let's at least call out that there are definitely hotspots, trouble spots for folks with ADHD and screen time or technology use. You know, there's lots of research that is at the very least shows you know, connection, not necessarily causality, but certainly correlation between the ADHD brain and a particular sensitivity to the effects of screen time. So, you know, particularly drawn into interacting with screens, and the brain reward systems that we all have are particularly sensitive to the addictive qualities of screens. So, you know, you've heard, you can, we've seen this in the headlines, sort of the dopamine hit that you get from a like on your photo or from some new TikTok reel or whatever it is. Those all of our brains are sort of wired to be rewarded by these you know, by these apps, by these tools, by these experiences. And the ADHD brain may be particularly vulnerable to that. The other trouble spots here are that screens can affect sleep. So, you know, it's particularly important to have a really good sleep hygiene, a really good sleep routine. Folks with ADHD may be particularly sensitive or to like sleep deprivation and may have trouble actually falling asleep, and screens make that worse. We know that, science for sure. Time management, again, like I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD. The internet made it impossible for me to manage my own time prepping for this, because there were so many interesting things to see and look at. And then impulse control. So that desire to go and keep playing the game, keep clicking through Instagram, keep scrolling, and, you know, not be able to sort of tolerate the frustration or the kind of unrest that comes up when your brain's not engaged in the screens. So like, just really, I know this is basic stuff. You guys know this stuff most likely, but really calling out that these screens are certainly tied to all of these particular trouble spots. So, you know, one of the questions, and I want to encourage folks, I don't know, I'm sorry. I was going to try and keep an eye on either the chat or questions. I think it's the chat in this particular Zoom setup. So people are welcome to put things in the chat throughout, and I'll try and keep my eye on that. But question that we get a lot is, how much time should someone be allowed on a screen? And that's really, it's a good question to ask, because we all spend too much time on screens, and the practice of setting time limits consistently and early with children, and, you know, throughout the lifespan is important. But there's no magic number. I'm not going to come up and tell you the number of hours or whatever. You can Google the pediatric, you know, American Pediatrics. There's also, it's a very personal decision, but time restrictions alone are not enough. It's not necessarily the right question to ask. It's more interesting questions are, what are we doing with this time on our screens? Is this time well spent? And just like every choice we make with our time and our intention and our activity, the time that we spend on screens is displacing something else. It could be displacing something unhealthy, right? It could be, there's all sorts of unhealthy activities it could be replacing, but it also could be replacing healthy activities. So is the time online, no matter what it is, if it's 20 minutes, if it's a half an hour, if it's 8 hours a day, is it taking away healthy sleep? Is it taking away healthy face-to-face social interactions, school or work, focus and time and energy, physical activity? These are the questions to be asking. What are we doing instead? What is screen time replacing or displacing? Another important question is like, are we using screens actively or passively? Passively has been shown to be more detrimental to mental health, to attention, to just time management, overall health, versus active. How do we increase active and decrease passive? And what I mean by that is passive is like, I'm victim to this as well. I open up Instagram and oh my God, where on earth did the last 47 minutes ago? I don't need to know about this influencer who makes her own clothing and homeschools with children. Like, she can do whatever she wants. Why did I feel the need to learn everything about her life? Like, that is a passive doom scrolling, like kind of just continuing to watch what comes up. Versus active, which is, it could be gaming where you're actually interacting with your friends or a social network. It could be, something, it could be, building or creating something. It could be learning or teaching yourself a new skill. So it's active versus passive. And how do you monitor the passive and try and decrease that? And then also just the fact that not all platforms are the same. So again, I won't get into saying what are good and what are bad, but your time spent on certain apps or platforms is different than time spent else on other ones. And that could be a very personal and kind of amorphous question of what is best for me. What's best for my children, for my classroom, but they're not all the same. So these are questions that can be asked in addition to like, how much time should we spend? So if time restrictions are not the answer, what can parents do? And again, parents, partners, teachers, educators, parents are my standard go-to term here. So we can talk about, and this applies to all, talk about the idea of intentional use. So when, executive functioning is an area of struggle, being intentional and being mindful with the time, with your activity, with how your day is spent is a challenge. And the ability to just always kind of default to the screen in your pocket or on your desk makes it even more of a challenge. So how do we really talk about intentional use and notice, am I just grabbing for the phone because it's a habit, because it's easy, because it's just, it's just what I do? Or is there a purpose to what I'm looking for? Reducing that mindless use. So reducing that like zoning in, zoning out, and kind of like getting stuck in the repetitive or the endless kind of passive scrolling or screen time. Definitely like thinking about what problematic content is. So again, that may be different for everyone, but like really trying to put limitations, but also mostly talk to the user about content that is violent, that expresses, that may be biased views on world events, that may be, have poor body image displays that may have like a lot of materialistic kind of consumerism that then leads to problematic impulsive spending, etc. So what is problematic? Define that for your household, for your family, for your classroom, for your, your group, and practice being more mindful of, is this content on the border where like, I don't feel great about it. I should really be thoughtful about how much time I spend here. And then also like problematic content that really needs to be, forbidden. That's not a very good, I'm like, that's the antithesis of what I've been saying here. Like, not forbidden, but really limited, really like put a boundary around certain content that is not going to be healthy or age appropriate. This goes along with aligning with our values. So how do we use technology in a way that aligns with the person that we want to be, the life we want to live? And this can be incorporated in things like executive functioning training and in therapy, and in,
Excuse me? Exactly. Here we are again.
In just like routine setting and habit building, and behavioral contracts and reinforcement of certain behaviors and ignoring other behaviors. What is the life and that we want to live? What are my values, and how do I deliberately choose behaviors and actions that align with that? This is something that I personally have been spending a lot of time on in our household in the new year. It kind of automatic, this naturally for me, I always think about in January, what are the changes I want to make? What is the life I want to live? What is the values I want my everyday choices to align with? And it can be really hard to continue revisiting it and to be faithful to those. So the other thing, like what can parents and supporters do, is we can talk about these interventions that really do have some benefit to some of the downsides of screen use. So I'm going to get into things like the idea of a brief detox, or making it harder to engage in the technology, especially for those that, the impulse control, like slowing yourself down to think about something before you engage in it. There are some great tips that we're going to talk about that we can help make it harder. We can help slow that down a bit. So mindfulness, I would love to hear sort of at the end, like how much mindfulness is, what this group uses mindfulness for, if at all, if it's something that folks practice or is talked about by other speakers in this series. But mindfulness is all about really paying attention to what's going on in the moment, what our body is experiencing, and what our mind is sort of thinking, and really slowing down and being in touch with what's going on in your mind and your body and your surroundings. And one of the difficulties of screen time is it can be mindless. And we all need mindless things sometimes, but this is a risk of too much mindless stuff and getting sucked in. So practicing modeling, like if you are a parent or a teacher or, a clinician, how do you incorporate, like just model and start the discussion of like paying attention to how screens make you feel. So everyone can sort of be coached and structured and scaffolded to really think about, okay, what was it like to be on my screen for 3 hours today? How did I feel afterwards? What did I notice when I use my phone for 20 minutes versus 3 hours? What do I notice when I'm on TikTok versus, reading in the New York Times, which could be equally as like rabbit holey, right? But what do I notice about those two different experiences? How do I feel about social media versus other types of technology use? What is my actual reaction to the time I'm online? What's my mental state? Do I feel different? Do I sleep differently? When I make changes, when I make little changes, do I notice a downstream effect in my life? Am I spending more time with my friends? Am I sleeping better? Am I doing better at school? Am I outside more? I'm going to be vulnerable here again. I'm doing a dry January. And that has become a popular thing, right? As we all recover from COVID and also just really get in touch with how alcohol may not be so great for us. And many of us use it, a little too much or maybe more often than we may want. So I am doing a dry January. That's a reflection on any problem I have. It's just a lifestyle, just on a reset I want to do, my husband and I. And it's amazing what I've seen in 8 days. I've noticed my sleep is different. I'm working out. I've gone to 5:30 a.m. classes at the gym 4 times. I definitely have a harder time kind of unwinding sometimes after a long day. So I'm noticing the pros and the cons, but a couple, a break, like tuning in, doing something different and noticing the effects. I'm learning quite a lot about just like my eating and dry January. I'll speak for myself for 8 days. So screens are the same. What do you notice when you do something a lot? And then what motivates you to maybe make some changes and then pay attention to what comes up? I am going to make sure that I have a list of resources. There are a lot of really great resources out there. One of them is it's called Dear Parents. It's a digital well-being resources from kids to parents. And it does a lovely job of naming straight from a teenager or an adolescent's mouth what is most helpful for parents to do. And every child is different, so you'll see a range of things. Like my parents have set the expectation, but then allow me to figure out how to succeed within that expectation. Or my parents give me a limit, but then they also limit my social media use each day. And I really need that type of control and that boundary. Or my parents listen. They don't judge me. They validate me. And they are curious and open to hearing about my opinion, my questions, and my feelings. So this is we'll make sure to kind of get hopefully these links available. They're all like open access, lots of great organizations. I've tried to highlight the most sort of poignant, hands-on doable things. One thing, what can a parent do? Hopefully this is something that's not totally foreign, but it's really hard to do as a parent myself. Catch your child being good. So often, one of Dr. Harold Kopowitz, the founder of the Child Mind Institute, and he's become a mentor and a friend of mine. He has a story about how he had a child he was taking care of who had ADHD, and he thought his name was No David, Stop David, because they're always being told, no, stop, what you're doing wrong, redirected, don't do that, don't do this. And it is really easy to do that, of course, right? But it's hard to catch them being good. It's really, and it's so powerful to be caught doing good. Imagine, I want to challenge you all to imagine the last time somebody just caught you doing something good and called you out on it, and how unbelievably empowering it was, and nice and like validating it is. Like somebody sees me when I'm not only where I need to improve, but also when I'm really doing well. And this can be for spouses, it can be for managers with a team, it can certainly be for parents, teachers. But how do you catch them being good? Because that's what powers us. It's our horsepower to want to continue to build those strengths and those good behaviors. And it creates a empowered self-identity. So again, this is something I'm practicing not only with my children, but with my husband too. Thank him, catch him being good. Don't be a nag. Don't turn into the stereotypical, wife who's like, well, you folded the socks wrong. I may do that also, but I also today thanked him for being such a good dad and building a snow fort with the kids after school and being outside and playing with them. Okay, so here's a practical thing we can try. And this is a screen or social media detox or break. Now, this can sound scary. It can sound overwhelming. Like, hello, Lindsay, and my kid needs screens and internet for school, work, social life, all that stuff is valid. So this can be crafted to fit your life and your needs. And it's really just all about, like I said, my dry January, taking a step back. It can be scary to think about cold turkey. Doesn't work for everyone. But here's some suggestions for little things you can do to take a little detox or a break. So schedule time away from your phone each day. Put it in the other room. I had to do that over the weekend because I couldn't even read a lovely book without wanting to look at my phone repeatedly. So I put it in the other room finally. Students, I've heard this, don't use Instagram during finals, delete that app. Over the holidays, like, delete the apps that you use most often, or put your phone in the other room during Christmas morning when you're all unwrapping stuff, right? So you're not distracted automatically. Remove a specific app or make it harder to get to. There are a lot of different apps or programs or plugins that can block certain websites, certain distractions, certain games. It can limit times, and that's some of my resources I'll share as well is details on those specific apps. But removing something from your phone so you can only access it on the web is one way to, for those, middle-aged people like myself, that's a way that I cannot go into my academic doom scrolling or distraction or rabbit hole. Where I'm convincing myself that constantly reading these articles that are sort of relevant to my job, but I could do for 6 hours straight. But that's not distraction because it's learning, it's relevant, I'm learning, right? No, not really, because I didn't actually get the job done that I was supposed to do today. So, making it a little harder, removing it, taking it one step further away. Silencing or limiting your notifications. So kids, I've noticed, their notifications are on all the time, all of them. And there's a lot of science on how the notifications, whether it's on our screens, our watches, our phones, are horrific for our attention. And, how much time is lost when we have to refocus after every time our attention is disrupted. Creating no phone areas. So, perhaps as a family, you decide that the kitchen table is a no phone area, or, the den is a no phone area, but the TV room is where electronics are fine. Or, in an ideal world, a bedroom is a tech-free zone because that promotes better sleep. Well, this is sort of an anecdotal quote I've heard some experts say, but also there's research that shows that folks who do take a break of some sort, any sort, from any sort of social media or technology, they've gained something, they've learned something, whether it's been an insight, a learning, a realization of their pattern of behavior, some more in tune mindfulness to what technology is doing for them, or even a decrease in their symptoms of anxiety or depression or FOMO or fear of missing out, right? They really, both anecdotally and research, people gain something from even a short one, a week, a day, a couple of hours. So this is definitely something to consider. This is what's tough for me. And I'm even realizing I don't even feel confident about what order my slides are in here because it's just so rich, this topic. But this is what's tough for me is, as a parent and as an adult, they're watching us. My 6-year-old and my 8-year-old are watching me. And that's what's so hard about being a parent, being a partner or a teacher or a caretaker, is that we have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. that consistency and predictability and routine is crucial, and that is exhausting to uphold all day and every day. Parental fatigue is very, very real, and setting unrealistic, unachievable kind of expectations for the household, for the classroom, that you yourself aren't 100% sure you can follow through on, is really almost more detrimental than not trying at all, right? Because it's setting an expectation, it's not following through, it's reinforcing at a variable rate of behavior so that you never really know what you're going to get. And that is not what anyone needs, especially folks with ADHD. But it's really, really hard. And you have to know yourself. You have to acknowledge where you're strong and where you're not so strong. And you have to be prepped for that. I recently have acknowledged, my husband and I am, I'm building for, it's a startup. We're working our tails off. I am beat by the time bedtime comes around. And in the last year, I've been horrific at bedtime. I get impatient. I'm not consistent. I get snippy, and it's awful. I don't feel very good about myself as a mother or as a person or as frankly, a child psychologist who's teaching other people how to do this stuff. So, we've talked about it, my husband and I, he's really good at it. And I've accepted that I'm not a bad mother if he does bedtime and I do the things that I'm really good at and I enjoy. And at this season of life, we're dividing and conquering in a way that makes sense for us and that makes sense for our kids and our household. But, it didn't feel good to say like, I'm a mother to bed because I just don't like it. That doesn't feel good, but I'm okay with it because I do a lot of other stuff really freaking well. And so, I'm going to lean into those things and ask for help where I need it. Being ready for the emotions that come up. Emotions are okay. When you set limits, when you ask for change, when you challenge someone to really tap into what's going on for themselves, emotions are going to come up for them and for you. And modeling that you can tolerate the distress of others around you and your own distress is a really important skill. You want to be the thermostat in the room as far as the emotions go, and not the thermometer. I always mix that one up, but a thermometer is going to rise to the emotional level of the room, of the household, of the classroom. The thermostat sets it. And can be really hard. That emotion regulation, distress tolerance, frustration tolerance can be really hard. Each family, each classroom, each group is very different. So thinking about how to experiment with this is highly individualized. And it's really important to remember that we're all very susceptible, but in different ways. It's important to have different strategies for different ages. So setting real limits for little kids, limiting things, setting, I don't know how often folks talk about, behavioral contracts or sticker charts or earning privileges or consequences to behavior, but those grow with different ages. During a tough stretch, during a crisis, parents may need to be more involved. When you worry about your child's safety, their mental health, their wellness, you may need to be more involved, stepped in, and then take a step back. And what's really neat is that, even with little kids, you can start talking to them and get their input. They may not be able to think about, my 6-year-old may not be able to think about their screen use as a problem, but they may be able to talk about the good and the bad. What do they see at school? What do they hear about from their peers? What do they notice about their use or their changes? And definitely college kids can talk about this. Young adults can talk about this. And I can talk about this as a something-year-old person, right? That pay attention, tune in. So what can parents do? What can we do for ourselves, for others? It is valuable to limit screen time from an early age, meaning that it doesn't become your default sort of parenting tool or babysitter or kind of go-to. And that's not to say that screens don't have their place, and all of us think that we're going to bring an iPad to a restaurant, and then you know what, it happens sometimes. And so it's about cutting yourself a break, but limiting, being conscious, setting something up from a young age, it is really important, because it sets that idea of boundaries and on and off from a very early age. While screens are a necessity for kids, started for schools starting early, for social lives, for us, for work, screen time is also a privilege. It's something that comes after the rest of life's requirements. So I think it's on the next slides, but if you're not able to meet basic life requirements like school, work, hygiene, physical health, then screen time comes later, right? It's a privilege that we earn when we're living rounded lives. Parents can definitely use apps and kind of phone settings to block distracting websites, apps, games. They can limit times on certain social media sites. They can turn on and off like Wi-Fi, stuff like that. There's this log off movement has some really great resources for specific apps and programs to use. It also has this link I have here, also has some really cool tips on how to optimize your settings. So working with your child or partner or whoever to set your notification settings so that they're limited, so that you're really using these various like focus settings and modes. Really dig in, learn how you can have a school setting, a sleep setting, a study setting, blah, 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 really optimize those things so that you're not getting distracted more than the bare minimum. And then this is a first for me. There are certain settings that turn your phone to more of a grayscale, because the colors are so visually stimulating that using a grayscale can really help decrease that visual stimuli that keeps us coming back to our phones. Putting an app like way on on the fourth screen, so you have to scroll a bunch of screens in order to find your app, instead of it being right there on the home page. These are little things that just slow down that impulse a little bit, and that we can work on for ourselves, for our partners, for classrooms, for our kids, to really set the tech itself up to be as little distracting as possible. For little kids, here's some thoughts. Thinking about screen-free mornings. How do you start your day positively without a screen? This is particularly important when you think about morning routines and getting off to school effectively. Parents who have eliminated screens, of course, it can be hard at the beginning, but then find that the mornings go much more smoothly. Planning activities outside, being in nature has been shown, research has shown how important that is to just managing your anxiety, your mood, feeling more connected to one another and to the world around you. And it's a lot easier to leave your devices at home when you are outside in nature, especially as a family. Building in opportunities for sensory play. So instead of the sensory feedback that you would get from a screen, a video game, a social media interaction, you are doing stuff with your hands, with your other senses. Having like activities on hand. So, during COVID, when I had a 4 and a 2-year-old, really investing in like setting up little boxes, right? The rice, the beans, the like sand trays, now they have like activity boxes that we get kiwi crates in the mail every month that give the kids something to do with their hands that are new, that teaches them engineering skills, building skills, that are a strain on my budget, but less on my creativity and my bandwidth and my planning skills, right? So having actual activities around that are not electronic. Meals are a really good time to not be on screens. And again, modeling limited screen use ourselves, which I got to work on myself. It's really hard. Okay, some more, I'm gonna run through these quickly and wrap up, but more healthy habits that to think about as a family or as a unit of friends, roommates, watching things together and then talking about them, using things to stimulate conversation. If it's a movie, if it's a show, if it's a YouTube channel, being present and engaging it together and then talking about it. There's research that shows like reading on a physical book, paper versus a Kindle has certain benefits. Having those things around your house, like being able to write, you know, a note or a homework assignment with a pen and a paper, in addition to electronically, just having them kind of surrounding you, you're going to be more likely to pick them up and engage. Playing board games, doing puzzles with your hands, keeping these physical play items around so that you can engage, you know, in, again, tactile, physical. You can play backgammon on, you know, online. My dad and my husband do that all the time. There's something different about when they take out the backgammon board, right? Have them around so it's easier. Take a walk without your phone or even without a podcast. Imagine how hard that would be to not have that audio stimulation. You have to sit with your own thoughts. Talk to your kids about like what it's like to actually look up and find the answer without Googling it. It's not just about producing the answer. It's about the process of discovering or finding the answer, building that knowledge, following a trail, being a detective, knowing what book to look for, without Googling the answer quickly. And then setting up things to socialize without technologies for your children as a family. Being screen-free before bed, keeping devices out of bedrooms. It's super important for health, for sleep hygiene. If at all possible, how can you separate your work or school devices from like your more fun social devices or something there, even room space in your house, like separating, you know, we know we're attached to this for school and work, but how can we separate that out from the more extra fun stuff? We got to help our kids and each other remove the temptation when we need to concentrate. We just do, right? Like that is somewhere where we need to step in and, you know, when it's homework, when you are having something, you know, doing a social interaction, when you're doing chores, taking away the access to technology is important to teach them how to do that themselves and to set that kind of pattern up for them. Try not to text your child during the school day or your spouse during the work day or your friends. Like, yeah, that's hard. And kids are getting texts all day during school or during work. And then this, you know, standard of consistently meeting self-care or well-being activities before you engage in screens. So in the morning for adults, you know, so many of us turn around, we roll over, we pick up our phones, the first thing we look at. But what if we first showered, dressed, ate breakfast, and then checked our phone? Or what if we just sat still and meditated or, you know, sort of sat quietly with ourselves and our thoughts for 5 minutes before we looked at our phones? When you get back from school, unpacking your backpack, having a snack, laying out your homework, you know, cleaning out your lunchbox before you turn on the screen. These are all little things that actually are very difficult to do at my house anyway. So this idea that you got to meet certain things and then you can earn the screen time or engage in it. And then finally, like this importance of boredom, of letting ourselves, our kids, and one another get bored and tolerate it. As a psychologist, I used to work in a hospital for adolescents, and they couldn't have their phones or anything else there when they were in the hospital. And so often they talked about being bored. And I talk so much about what is that code for? Like, what is bored code for? Because I think really what's happening is without a distraction of, you know, anything in your pocket or the screen or the constant social connection via technology, it's just you. It's just you and the quiet of your brain and your thoughts and who you are. And that can be really uncomfortable for some folks. It can be really uncomfortable if you're not used to it. And it's also one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is learning to like yourself in the quiet and the silence and the stuff, the person who you are when there's nothing else around you to distract you. So, delaying gratification, self-reliance, being okay with yourself, learning how to tolerate and cope with unstructured time, self-reflecting and getting creative. Like, God, remember the stuff we used to do in car rides because there were no screens. So this idea of building in time to get bored. This is my last slide. I'm done, I promise. There are some really cool organizations out there that are incorporating evidence-based principles from clinical psychology that we use at Fort Health, that we use at good therapists and other clinicians are using from cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, other evidence-based treatments that are applied to healthy technology use across the lifespan. And these are, these are resources that are readily available online, freely available online, used for kids and adults. And they're doing things like teaching about cognitive distortions and thinking errors, because we're all particularly susceptible to those things when we're on our screens. How do we challenge those things? There's these really neat exercises about, like, what are my core values? What are my beliefs? How do I use screens to support them instead of taking them away? And then this idea of habit tracking, of, routine and predictability and habits, they all go hand in hand, right? And so we're all in a lot of bad habits, and technology use often can be a bad habit. So the Center for Digital Thriving is from Harvard, and make sure that you guys hit the link where it just has all sorts of hands-on exercises around how you can learn about like technology design and really geek out on what it is that gets us to be so engaged and addicted to engaging with our technology. But then what are we going to do about it? Then we're going to try and challenge ourselves to change our habits, because I want them to better align with my core values and beliefs. So really cool resources out there that use, again, evidence-based principles, the stuff that we've been doing and studying for a long time to really build a healthy lifestyle, a healthy life interaction with technology and screens. And that's the whole goal here, to learn how to live in peace and harmony with technology and with screens and social media, because they're not going anywhere. So, with that, it's already been an hour. I'll take a breath, and I would love to invite questions or feedback or conversation. And I really hope that this was helpful.
This was great. Folks, if you have any questions, perhaps you can put them in the chat. The other option would be to, I guess, unmute yourself, and as if you were raising your hand. There used to be a raising your hand thing, but there's a reaction thing. Oh yeah, if you press reaction at the bottom, you can raise your hand like this. See how the hand is up? So if anybody has, did you know that? Yeah. So if anybody has any, let me lower my hand. Any questions? I mean, if nobody's speaking up, I just want to say how much I love your sharing of yourself and your vulnerability. And it just made it so much more real, as opposed to, clinical and, here's what to do and here's what you don't do. Because we all are vulnerable in some way, shape, or form. And
Yeah.
sharing
all this is easier said than done, right? Sorry, Ellen, I just cut you off, but thank you for that. All this is easier said than done. And as a clinical psychologist leading a child and adolescent mental health company, I have had to get help in areas that I couldn't sleep train my baby. I was going crazy, right? And I was a psychologist thinking way too much about everything I could be doing wrong, that I needed somebody to help me do the stuff that I learned how to do in grad school. So, it's really hard stuff, and being honest about that is, I think, important.
Absolutely. So, Joni or Andrea, do you have any questions or any comments?
Yeah,
Or
I
anyone else, actually?
great. I thought it was great. Lindsay, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that, like you said, it's not going away, no matter how much we wish it to be going away, or we may be wishing it to go away. So I'm really having to try to figure out how to navigate that with your kids at different ages. And I find that when my kids are older now, they're 19 or they're 20 and 23. And, my 23-year-old's my ADD and my 20-year-old is not. And it's different, with both of them. But I still worry, like even with the 20-year-old, that even though he doesn't have ADHD and he seems to not have that addictive nature to the screens, it is a black hole because it's designed to be that way. We started to talk a little bit about this before the meeting. So like, how do you find that balance? Like it's designed to be that way. So I don't feel like I don't want to wait until, oh yeah, now I have a problem. So now I have to do something about it because I said, okay, do what you want to do with the screens. And at what age does that happen? I mean, they're 20 and 23, so it gets much harder.
Yeah.
So start early, people, start early. That's what I can tell you.
Start early, and it's never too late too.
Mhm.
So I was saying to you guys before we started that I got my first cell phone in college, right? And so I consider myself lucky that I went through school with like a word processor, but not the distractions that our kids do now. And my attention has just plummeted like in the last 20 years because of existing in this world right now. And whether that was poking at something that was always there underlying, or it's just I'm an average, adult, right? Who, like to your point, we're all vulnerable. I think that like there at any age, this is hard, and especially for kids who have never known life without it, like mine. I also think like this. So it's never too early, it's never too late. And that idea, instead of talking about like rules and time limits, and which are important, especially for people with ADHD for sure, and consistency, routine, also talking about like our values and our family culture, or what we want, how we want to be deliberate with the life we want to live, right? Like how many books have I not read in the last 10 years because I've scrolled Instagram, and like, just, okay, am I okay with that? Okay. If I'm not, like, then let's think about that. Let's talk about that. And your kids in college, or your 23-year-old, maybe whatever they're doing, they're going to be thinking about that stuff, I think, more and more than even the little ones are. So those conversations are never too late to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your question about like, well, thinking about what are you not doing? If you're choosing to do this, like whatever you choose to do, you're making a decision about what you're not doing. So just be aware, be intentional. If you want to do it, it's fine, but be intentional about what you're doing. Absolutely.
Lindsay, I'm just wondering, what do you think we can do differently in the schools with electronics?
Andrea, I'll say like, I don't feel equipped to answer that question, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you.
My son's in second grade. I know they use part of me honestly is like afraid to know how much they use electronics, but I also want to trust in the school systems, right? So well, you can see it's like it's raising some feelings in me that are like anxiety feelings as a parent. And I don't know, I'm not sure what to do. In an ideal world, I'd say like, can we separate it a little bit more? Does everything have to be done on a device that is going to have a distraction tool, whether it's the internet or solitaire, or just like, any device has a distraction mechanism. So that's what I would like, but that doesn't seem realistic anymore, right? So it's a great question that some other expert should weigh in on.
Do you have a favorite go-to? Like I'm familiar with Common Sense Media and I do like it a lot. Do you have any other ones that you can suggest that we can recommend to our parents? Oh, I think you're muted.
You did,
Lindsay,
and
There
I
you
was
go.
gonna, I was gonna really properly kind of share a list.
Please.
But there's several. There's this Center for Digital Thriving out of Harvard is pretty neat, and there's a lot of universities that are really working together to provide like applicable hands-on tools that are evidence-based but accessible. They've also, now I'm not going to remember the name of the book that the founders wrote, but wrote a book about like what parents are missing when they're looking and talking about their teen or their children's tech use. So what parents aren't seeing. Something called, I just shut down all my windows here, but there's something called the Center for Humane Technology, the Log Off movement, which was founded by a teenager actually. So there are some organizations that are like youth founded and driven. And I hope I will send kind of a list of what we at Fort have found to be really valuable. And I've sort of partnered with a bit too. Yeah.
Thank you.
that's great.
Behind Their Screens. That's the name of the book, Behind Their Screens.
Great.
So Lindsay, I'm wondering if we can have a copy of your slide deck. And if these are included, the resources are there, that's fantastic.
Mm,
Yes,
So-
yes. So I've linked all these here, and I'll go back and make sure I've got as much as possible there and share it with you guys for sure.
Can you say the name of the book again?
Yes, it's Behind Their Screens.
Lindsay, can you throw that slide up one more time?
Sure, 1 second here. So, okay.
Oh,
So
there it
this is what it linked to. What's great though is that if you don't want to read a whole book, this Harvard Center for Digital Thriving has some really easy to digest kind of click through like resources and kind of summaries of the work that they've done and guides for how you may be able to, let's see, the way you may be able to kind of engage in a classroom or at home in these some of these evidence-based kind of approaches that I mentioned. But let me just go back to this.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple more minutes left. If anybody has any questions or comments they would like to make or anything else. I mean, the take home is one size does not fit all. And can we take, even if it's a alcohol-free January, a screen-free January, a 5 moments to myself January.
Yeah,
Stepping back, even just to think about all this. And
I
to be
keep
honest with
ahead.
ourselves, I guess.
I was gonna
I'm
say, having
sorry.
conversations with our kids at all ages, right? Young, I mean, little kids can have lots of deep conversations about, like you said, Lindsay, like, how do you feel? You haven't been on the screen for an hour. How do you feel when you're on? How would you feel? What happens in your body? And, all these conversations that we can have with them to help them start being more mindful and start being aware of what is happening for them so they can start making some choices.
Yep.
There's so much that keeps running through my mind, but I'm thinking a lot about how do we keep the connection with our kids, because that's really the core of everything. Set boundaries, but fighting all the time over this is just so destructive to our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And this idea and again, like as I've owned that I'm not an ADHD expert. And so I hope that like I didn't miss the mark too much at not looking at like the containment and the boundaries and sort of the, you know, the routine setting. But this can underlie all of this, right? That we're all capable of both the, like, we need the support and the real life, like guardrails, and we got to buy into it on a deeper level, right? And our kids are, that's the best thing, one of the best things we could do for them is to be a safe place for them to talk about this, to ask questions, to get curious, to, you know, to disagree, to be mad. So, you know, like being curious and open and wanting to know more from them and knowing, you know, showing them that you're always there, you're a safe place is so important. And you're right that like the constant fighting is not, you gotta pick your battles. And my husband said to me 3 times over the weekend, Lindsay, you're taking the bait. Stop it. You're taking the bait. And it is, you know, it's true. It's like, wow, is this really what I want to be doing with my 8-year-old? I'm totally taking the bait. So, you know, we all need to be checked and like, remember what we just want to get, what do we want them to remember in 30 years? And what's the life we want them to be living? And what do I want to be living? Like, what life do I want to be living? How do I want to spend my days and my time?
Great questions. We have one in the chat. How can we read Dear Parents, a digital wellness?
Let me, okay. I'm gonna really try and see if I can put it in the, if I can put it in the chat real quick. Give me 1 sec.
Sure.
Might really.
You know, I think something that you touched upon too, Lindsay, is really important is to, when we're co-parenting, is to have these conversations with our co-parent so we can be on the same page. Because that just, if we're not on the same page, just adds another level of tension, anxiety, disconnect. So having these conversations with each other as co-parents is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm lucky my husband is also a therapist, so that makes it easier sometimes and harder other times. But yes, having those conversations and being able to say like, I gotta tap out, man. I'm not gonna be effective right now. Or can we compromise on how we're approaching our morning screen time, or like, you know, being able to have civilized conversations in the background and support one another. And like I've mentioned several times, the ability for someone to safely and respectfully say, call me out, like, you know, say, hey, Liz, you're doing this again. And for me to accept that and not be offended or annoyed, like that's a really great, you know, gift to give a partner or a sibling or a, you know, a family member or a friend, you know, those secret like high signs of like, hey, you're approaching the thing you don't want to do.
Lindsay, this is
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Lindsay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, and I see in the chat that people are, you put
I put
the
a couple, yeah. a couple
links in the chat. Thank you. And folks, we will have this recording posted on the website, bergencountychad.com. And see if, you know, let us know if there's anything that we can offer that we're not offering. Another way that we can be of help. We are here to help you, to help parents, to help adults with ADHD, therapists. We're here to help you as well. So please reach out. And thank you again for coming. And Lindsay, yes, well done. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
We're fabulous.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
feel free to unmute yourself and thank Lindsay, because it was really great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes,
Thank
you're very welcome.
you.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
All right, so we can